Hey everyone, welcome to SVT time. It is Tuesday, October 24th. This is episode, I lost track, but this is episode 58. 58 of these, yeah. Like I said, we'll keep on doing them until they tell us to stop. But and yes, in case anybody's wondering, it is freaking cold down here. So this is why I'm dressed up like this, unlike you two guys that are in LA right now. But anyways,
I got a 3/4 on.
I hand gesture. Anyways, welcome everyone. My name is Dino Monoxylus. Obviously, we've got Dom, my ever faithful co-host on the show here. Today's guest is Eliot, and correct me if I pronounce it wrong, but I'm going to say Lorango.
Lorango is how we say it. I think Lorango is probably more correct. But,
okay.
We say Lorango.
Lorango, tomato.
Yeah.
Portaflex, Waterflex, either one.
Yeah.
Oh man, Eliot, thank you so much for joining us today. It's finally awesome, be able to sit down and chat with you without running around at NAMM shows and trade shows and
a million people running around trying to get your attention. What does this do? Hey, let me turn the amp up a little louder.
Exactly. Now you're in LA. You're in LA as well, I'm assuming, right? Okay.
Yep.
So both of you guys are, and we're not going to talk much about the weather, but it has been cold here in southern New Hampshire.
Yeah, yes. It's like spring here.
Thanks.
We're so happy it's cooling off at 68 degrees. It's great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I had to turn on the heat last night because it was so cold. But anyways, so yeah, man. So I know we've been in and out of contact over the last couple of years here. More so since and you're not. I will say this: we need to get you officially on the website. You've always been a part of the Ampeg family. There's no question about that because we kind of roam in the same circles. And I think you originally were introduced to me via Brian Allen from Nashville.
Yep.
And so, how do you know Brian? This is going to be my first question.
So, I went to Musicians Institute in 2005. And he was an instructor.
Okay.
For some of the live performance workshops. And I'd always go to this freestyle hip hop one where they'd give you two kind of key changes to go through or whatever. And you kind of made up your own thing. And Brian Allen was the bass instructor there.
Okay.
And he always had good advice, but I always remember one thing. I would do this nervous thing where I'd smack the strings. And he's like, don't do that. It's bad. It's like a nervous habit. And it never left me. I was like, that is some of the most useful advice I have ever gotten. I never did it again. And you start to think, when you're in the studio, if you did that, it would be like your track is unusable because someone's going to have to sit there and edit. And that was the first run with Brian. But then I didn't see him for years. He moved to Nashville and he was touring with Jonathan Davis, the singer of the band Korn.
Yep.
And he was playing upright. And we were on the same radio festival thing, and he was on upright playing blazing 16th notes on this
on upright.
Kind of, I guess, on upright. And I was like, I don't know if you remember me, you were my teacher.
That's amazing.
I was hoping you were going to tell me you saw him online. And he was like, just tapping the strings like
crazy. So that is wild. So that's one thing that I never. So you are an MI alumni, as I am. I left in 97, and ironically, I won't say Brian was technically one of my students, but by the time he got to MI, he was so far advanced. There wasn't a whole lot that I could teach Brian other than give him advice on certain things because he was just a monster player when he showed up anyways. But that's wild. So awesome. Tom,
him.
Okay.
No, I remember seeing him when I think I was at MI. I saw him play with John Schofield, and that's when I was like, "Oh, he's an alien. He can do anything."
He is definitely an alien. Yes, and one of the nicest guys in the business too.
Yeah.
So, let's give us a little bit about your background. So, you were born and raised in L.A.
Yep.
Torrance, right?
Yeah, Torrance. Yeah.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm going to shut up.
Born and raised in LA. wanted to play piano because my uncle was a classical pianist, but in New York. And of course, I didn't follow through with that. And then I was like, I want to play sax. So my mom instead was like, why don't you try flute first? And I, of course, didn't stick with that. And then in middle school, this always sounds silly at this age. I was really obsessed with Kiss. And I was like, I want to be like Gene Simmons. I want a bass. And my parents were like, you got to play guitar first. I'm like, I don't want to play guitar. I don't want to be Ace Frehley. I want to be Gene Simmons. So then I spent the next year convincing my parents to get me a bass. And they're like, but then you have to join a band. And my big excuse to them was the example of, I'm like, no, you can play bass by yourself. I remember was the intro to NIB, the Black Sabbath song.
Sure.
It's about 1 minute and he's just, playing bass by himself. I'm like, so you can play bass by yourself. This is kind of a tactic to just get my parents to get me a bass because I know I wanted to play in a band. That's the whole thing.
Smart.
So for my 14th birthday, they got me a bass, and then that one I stuck with.
Man, it sounds like with your logic and arguing skills at the time, you could have been a lawyer. Just saying.
If my mom ends up watching this, sorry, Mom, I knew what I was doing.
How dare you say that word on this broadcast? But that, again, very similar backgrounds. Like I remember seeing Kiss on the Paul Lynde Halloween special.
No way.
And I wanted to be Gene Simmons. And of course, my dad, an old Greek truck driver, was like, heck no.
Yeah.
Are you ever going to? So,
it's like, cute kid, go to bed. I don't want to hear
it. Yeah, right. So were anybody else in your family musically inclined? Did they play instruments other than your uncle in New York, or
just my uncle? I believe there might have been like a second or great uncle that maybe played sax, but I didn't know them. No one on my mom's side of the family, as far as I know, played music. Wow. My dad would play. He would always play records, and I remember hearing like Charles Mingus, and then in the car he'd have Led Zeppelin on and all this stuff. So that was probably the upbringing of like we listened to music. Yeah. But no one else was playing music. My brother stuck with the piano a little longer, I think, than I did. That was, the only other person.
Yeah. No, and that's, like I think anybody that's musically inclined or any fellow musicians, like, we all kind of come from some sort of like same thing. I didn't have anybody musically talented in my family, but everybody played records, and I was the youngest out of all of them. So it was like everything from James Taylor to Kiss.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's your musical education right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you play in any high school music programs or anything like that? Or
I did the high school jazz band.
Okay.
I think I only did it my last year. I remember doing choir for a couple of years. And to be honest, I did choir mostly because I knew it would sometimes get you out of class because you would go sing at little events and stuff like that. So
sure.
It's like, oh, I want to do that. I can get out of school and sing.
Of course.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so. All right. So at this point, did you always have your eyes set on going to Musicians Institute, or I know obviously being a local school, but there are other schools in the area that you could have chosen too.
I was looking at Berkeley, and I took like a year off of high school before going to school, thinking I could save money. And it's like, obviously not saving music college money. I looked at Berkeley, and without getting some sort of scholarship, which I didn't have, any sort of advantage of getting, Berkeley was way too expensive is what I realized. I was like, wow. Because I spent half the time at MI, I ended up just commuting from my parents' house.
Sure.
Because it was so expensive. And I would have liked to have gone to school probably for 4 years, but that expense would have been, for me at least, insane.
Yeah.
I don't regret going to school. I'll say that. Some people that like to badmouth their experience at MI or whichever school they went to. I don't have that experience. I don't think I'd be working full-time as a bass player had I not at least kind of really motivated myself. And, you have to make it work because it was a student loan debt, and I've got to make good on this, debt that I've entered.
Yeah.
It's, and it's unforgivable too, as I'm starting to learn. But no, it's, like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, me growing up here in New England, I mean, literally, I'm 45 minutes from Boston, and I had the option of going to Berkeley. But number one, I wanted to get out of the cold. There was, it was like, I'm just, in case anybody that knows me knows, I'm warm blooded as it comes, but it's all about connections. Whether you go, obviously you go to school and you want to learn things that you haven't learned, but it's all about connections too. Like your connection with Brian Allen and my connection with Brian Allen through MI, and like that network would have never happened hadn't it been from involving yourself in that atmosphere, sort of thing.
I know, and I keep hoping that some of this doesn't die down, because it is really easy to educate in this era, I think, on YouTube, but sometimes the human interaction. I still work with a lot of the people that I went to school with. One of them even being, I think she was maybe there for the vocal program, but this artist, Skylar Stone Street, and she's had quite the career, not just her music, but writing for other people, whether it's like Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande and stuff like that. And we still have recorded stuff together just for her kind of like indie music project and stuff. And that was just by being friends and hanging out at school. And I don't know how that works in this era.
Yeah. Yeah. And networking, it's all about networking, and, hanging out at the Baked Potato, hanging out at the local jazz spot or the local jam spot, and just meeting other musicians and playing,
Yeah. And that's the fun of it too, still, to me. I'm like, I like going out and hanging out and meeting people.
Absolutely. So, all right. So how did you, like, what was your first real, like, big gig? Obviously, I know you're one of the founding players or founding members of the band Dorothy, which has gotten some recognition there. Was that kind of your jumping point into touring and studio work?
I had a band right out of MI that was like a band, and then I jumped out of that in 2010, maybe. I had started with an artist, Matt Toka. Rob Cavallo had produced him, and he had all these kind of people behind him. And that was a full-time sideman gig for a couple of years. It was kind of the Warped Tour-ish scene of stuff.
Yep.
That was more of the jumping, spot to start doing other stuff and have the opportunity to start like trying to get in with different sessions and other hired gun gigs. Dorothy, I joined the very beginning of 2014. She didn't have a record deal at the time.
Okay.
And she had these producers that produced her first record that were writing with her, and they weren't really sure what to do, and they were auditioning guys. And I came in, and me and this other long-haired drummer came in. He was just a basher. And they were like, I think we found our guys. We want to go this route. And they weren't, I wasn't sure what route they were even trying to go at the time. That first record is a little bit more maybe alternative, I'd say, even though it has kind of like fuzzy riffs and stuff. And then I actually was only able to stick with her at that point because she signed her deal after we did this video. I was only able to play in the band for about 6 months because I had a band at the time that had signed a deal with Interscope. And when that was a very short-lived thing, and when that ended, Linda Perry was reforming like a new band for Dorothy.
Okay.
And she wanted 60s, 70s rock kind of guys. And I rejoined at that time. I've been mostly around since then again.
Okay. Oh, cool. All right. So, and that was kind of, that started obviously getting into other projects and other.
Yeah. That felt like there was more visibility, at least in the rock world. And, any sort of gig you do feels like it kind of always turns into a similar genre thing. I don't, it's like, so if you do something rock, you'll find yourself on another rock gig. If you're on a country gig, you'll probably find yourself on another country gig.
Yeah. But you've kind of broken out of that mold though, too.
I try to.
I think we all try to, but
I think we all do.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm getting called for any jazz gigs anytime soon, unfortunately, but that's okay.
Me neither. I don't think that at this point, I think anyone wants to hear you play jazz. Doesn't go so well.
Speaking of jazz, do you play upright as well, or is it primarily all
electric?
I
have an upright sitting right in front of me here.
Okay.
I haven't touched it really since the beginning of 2020. I let another bass player borrow it actually and take it to Joshua Tree, when there was nothing to do, and he wanted to learn. I was like, you know what? I'm not really touching it anyway. And then I'd say about a year passed, and by the time I got it back, I was like, I'm not sure I want to break in those calluses again.
Yeah.
Like, as those were gone, and I was like, I'm not sure I want the blood on the thumb right there when you're trying to do that again.
It's such a different discipline too.
Yeah.
And different areas of pain.
Yeah. I wasn't great at it to begin with, and I'm like, now it's like this daunting task. It looks like a great piece of furniture though.
Makes a nice planter in the corner. Oh man. So do you do any producing? Are you producing anything at this point, or?
I don't produce. I'll write with people and stuff, but not so much the producing. I remember like taking a stab at it for a second. And I was like, I don't think this is me. I'm really like, I'm not really good when I work within the box and stuff like that. And that is such a discipline that I don't think I necessarily even enjoy. I remember Lee Sklar one time, I think it was him, who said, like, if you want to be a bass player, be a bass player then. Like, and I remember I was like, you know, as I get older, I'm like, I think this is what I should do. I enjoy doing that. I don't have any hangups with it.
Yeah.
It's something that still excites me at this point.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I'm kind of jealous of that, to be honest.
Well, Dom, you do it all.
It's a curse, man. It's a little bit of a blessing and a lot of bit of a curse. No, I'm thankful to be able to do it, but yeah, it's one of those things where I grew up. My first love was bass, and when I get back to just being the bass player here and there, it's like, this is nice. This is really nice. You're like just got one thing to worry about, and that thing is a good thing, and you're holding down the whole band. It's awesome.
Yeah, I kind of like it. It's less responsibility, and you just focus on the one thing. And maybe it's laziness on my end, but
no, I think
like
it's just
the one thing.
It's like the bassist approach. It's like we do this thing, and we are going to crush it, and we don't have to worry about all the noise out there. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but Dom, I got to ask you, and just to clarify, I've seen Dom's work process, like his track layouts, and I mean, I can't even begin to understand, like, you know, he needs a big screen TV in his studio so he can keep track of all his tracks. But
I see it on Instagram. I see it.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
So, but I mean, there are different, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there are different levels of producers in terms of, I'm a record producer, I'm a producer, because I think we all kind of fancy ourselves as some sort of producer, whether it be like, hey, I'm coming in to play these bass tracks and I really like having a D112 on my B15 sort of thing.
Yeah.
Versus the producer that, you know, takes the money from the record company and physically produces an album with an artist sort of thing.
Yeah.
The thing that scares me the most about, you know, really, like, if I were ever to call myself a producer, like, we can all sit and listen to a track with an artist and make suggestions on, well, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. And, you know, in all levels of production, when it gets into the nitty gritty of, yeah, we should take that 414. I mean, there's a lot of and Dom, I know you're good at this. Like, you know what mics work in different situations, and like that level of getting into the gear aspect of production just is like, I don't know. I can't hear the difference between a 57 and a 58. Not that there is any difference, but you know, so
that's a good thing. Yeah, I feel like even just the old school engineer, just the audio engineer, not even the producer, like that's a lost art. That's pretty incredible. We just have it so easy now with just grabbing samples or just having like Mike Sims or, you know, whatever. It's just the thing that always cracks me up when I think about that archetype is I don't know if you guys have seen the Portlandia skit where he's like, it's like Pet Sounds. This is like Pet Sounds. And it's just like the whole shtick is, it's so good. But it's like, yeah, that's how they get those records, man. It's like people were scientific about it.
Yeah. I mean, but so I guess at that point, it's kind of like, because technically you're in your studio, Dom, you are the producer and the engineer.
Yeah.
You have to be, you know what I mean? Otherwise, or else you're hiring an outside engineer to come in and engineer your projects with you.
Yeah.
So, you know, but yeah, it's like, could you picture somebody like Phil Spector
man.
Like saying, I mean, just the level of his vision of what he wants to hear, and then having to convey that to an audio engineer and the artist.
Yeah.
And pulling that, not only are you trying to pull a performance out of an artist, but you're trying to pull a sound out of an artist too.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like, that's scary stuff to me. It really is. So I'm with you, Eliot. Like, call me for a session. I'll show up with the bass and some really cool amps and stuff, and play bass for you.
I bet there's if we did a longevity test, I'm sure the bassist would live about 10 years longer than the producers.
Lee seems to be doing okay himself, so no complaints there. Did you guys see they're doing a new documentary, and it's the guy that did Danny Tedesco, the guy that did the Wrecking Crew for his dad.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing another documentary with all the and I don't know what it's called yet. I keep on picking up this toothpick. I don't know what it's called yet, but it's Waddy Wachtel, Russ Kunkel, Lee Sklar. It's like those studio cats that did like the James Taylor stuff, and it's really interesting. Again, it's just another look into the life of a studio musician, which I think is really cool. That's originally when I went out to LA, was to be a studio musician. And ironically, I remember sitting with Lee we were at a drag race, no less, like race car, NHRA drag race. And we were talking, and I asked him about the studio scene in LA. He kind of chuckled. He goes, "Yeah, you missed it by about 10 years." So,
jeez,
yeah. So, man. So, Ellie, you're primarily a P bass player, but I also see, I see Gibsons in the background, and
I think I have this, maybe that same bass as Dom right there. I think is that the Gilded Starfire?
The Starfire.
Oh yeah, Starfire. Yep.
Right, one of those right back there. Yeah, I toured with that one for a bit.
Is that a new Starfire or like an old?
That Starfire, I got it in 2018. So it's a newer one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually toured with Dorothy on that for a while, because most of that record that we did with Linda Perry, I tracked with a hollow body, but all the hollow bodies I kept using live were feeding back. You have an 810 behind you, and if you get a fuzz, it was chaos. So the Starfire is actually one of the only ones I've seen, at least these newer ones, that, because there's that center block, I guess there was no feedback.
Nice.
But I can't use it right now, not with Corey Taylor. A hollow body would not go so well when you're playing, heavy tunes or Slipknot songs. So, but P bass primarily. Yeah, it's the comfort of it,
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you gravitate mostly towards P basses? Any jazz basses, 5 strings, or anything like that too? Or
my 1 5-string is actually a jazz bass.
Okay.
I don't really. That doesn't see the light of day much. It sees the light of day on Sundays. At church that I play, it's perfect for that.
Okay.
But in general, I don't find, because I didn't probably grow up playing 5s, and I didn't get one till much later, I find the 5-string neck slightly more uncomfortable, especially for I've done for years the BEAD tuning to get away with not doing it.
Ask.
And that was the way I have a Stingray that lives in BEAD to get away with it. I find P basses, I still use a P bass with Corey Taylor live. And some of these songs, the Slipknot songs in particular, are in drop B. And I actually had to mod to put a jazz pickup in the bridge, because I find P pickups don't, at least in my experience, I've not found them to do that low B very clearly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree. Get a little flappy.
Yeah, and there's like such a low mid kind of bump in it that I'm having to like pull it out, and so adding that jazz kind of just helps it cut through.
Nice. Yeah.
Same thing. It's like I've got an old road worn P bass, and I'm primarily a 5-string player too, but it's just something about like every time I bring out a P bass with flats on it, no matter who you're working with, whether it's a rock group or blue, they all kind of go like, Duh.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's where I started with the P bass. It was like, well, how do I walk into an audition or a session and not get like kind of written off right off the top? Well, if you show up with the P bass, everyone
Right.
just accepts you right as is. It's like it's the neutral thing. Even if it's not used, you set that down to like, oh, he's fine. He's a bass player.
He's a bass player.
Yeah.
You don't show up with a coffee table. That's
exactly. It's like, and whether or not you use the P bass, at least you had the knowledge to bring the standard.
Now, how many basses do you normally take out on the road when you're out with Corey?
I'm just using 2 in a set, so I have 2 main and then 2 backups to those.
Okay.
So it's like whatever tuning it is, use that for drop, that kind of thing. It's like probably could bring more, but then that would mean for fly dates, that would be bringing a lot of stuff, and I don't want to bring more than that.
Another one of our, actually, we've got a few Ampeg family members here watching along. Mark Pacificar and my buddy Mark Damon, of course. P bass forever, Mark. Right on. Yeah. Mark is another fellow New Englander. So we
you guys live very close, I think, to each other, is what I believe he told me.
We do. We just had coffee a couple of weekends ago before he had to head out on the road. And he's a great guy to hang out with. And
I got to I've met him at some of these shows where Pretty Reckless and Dorothy have been on.
Okay.
And we've talked, of course. I've got to look at his whole Ampeg rig, which is he's got that 3 ready to go in case I think the Heritage is his main.
Yeah.
And the other day at one of these jam nights in LA that they brought back, I played a couple songs, and one of them ended up being a Pretty Reckless song. So,
nice.
Mark, I'm not sure if you saw it. I apologize if it was butchered, but I did my best impression.
Oh man, too far. We got to do one of these. My ultimate Ampeg dream is to, of course, spend the company's money in doing this, but no, but to like get everybody together and just have like a breakfast or a coffee or just an ultimate bass hang, so that everybody can just hang out and just hang out with each other and shoot the shit and talk coffee and talk bass. And because we never get to do. How often do you get to see another bass player on a gig unless you're doing a festival?
You have to do the hangs,
or you're at the NAMM show.
Yeah, and then whenever they've done, I don't know if you've ever gone to any of these bass player hangs. A lot of people have individualized ones depending on what group of friends they might have or circles they're in. And we always go like, we're not going to talk gear. Within the first 5 minutes, you're talking strings or something. You're like, oh, here we go. But I'm not going to bother you about it. But I saw that pedal you have on your board. And it's like, here we go. That's the entire hang.
There's like no other relation points. Everyone's like, this is all we got to talk about. This is our life.
Exactly.
This is actually
and there's no one else. There's no one else to talk to about it. You're not going to go to a drummer and being like, "Hey man, have you tried out this new pedal?" And like, no.
Right. It's it's like when you have band members over the house for dinner. You know what I mean? Like band members and their spouses, and you think it's going to be a family get together, and next thing you know, you're talking about last week's gig or this gig coming up, and the wives are just kind of like, oh.
Yeah. Remember that one gig? It turns into that for the whole time. That guy there.
Oh man. So John Willis is asking. I'll put this up here. See, I told you, man, this is really loose. Curious how much time he spends setting his live tone versus letting a tech dial in his rig. I think I know the answer to that.
I definitely spend the time doing it. I've had techs help me as far as if I'm like, I can't figure out which part of this chain is giving me this weird low end or low mid thing. That's actually something that I went through on this last story. And the guitar player actually for Corey, who plays in Stone Sour, he has a studio, and I actually went to him. I was like, I am getting this weird honky thing out of the cab, like not from the DI line. He's like, it's in the 220 range immediately. And I was like, how do you hear that? And I was like, took it down on the VR and I was like, that was it. He did
again.
It. I was like,
nice.
Again, producers,
baby.
Yeah. I like, I like knew. I was like, I have to go to him and ask him this question. I'm like, he's going to be the one. But I definitely am very annoyingly finicky with tones and stuff like that, even though an SVT doesn't have graphic. I don't like graphic cues and stuff, but it's still just little things where it's like, and it's always the mid-range. Should you pull something or push something? And it's different each gig, different each bass, sometimes stages. I definitely love playing with pedals, so depending on the gig, that I will spend a long time on tones. Usually I don't let the text dictate the tone though.
Yeah,
right.
Do you enjoy like basically spending that time pre-tour, just like, okay, cool, I have all these pedals in terms of tools, like I'm gonna set this up differently than last tour, and like, are you like an OCD clean pedal board guy, or are you just like mishmash of pedals?
No, I'm pretty bad actually. That's where I will let a tech if they are so willing to clean up my board, because I'm definitely, I always think of Tim LaFave when you see pictures of him. It's just like the pedals are all sprawled out. I'm like, that's how mine look. It's not. It's obviously not a good thing for touring to have your pedals just flying around. And I had Dorothy's guitar player actually one time. He cleaned up my board because I had, I don't know, I think 10 pedals at this point on this one tour, and he completely had to organize it. It was giving him anxiety, I think.
Yeah.
And I was grateful because I didn't have any problems versus my normal, oh, what's that noise? Oh, I unplugged the pedal. That's because I didn't even put Velcro on it or something like that.
That's funny.
But I do. I love messing. With Dorothy, I have a lot of freedom to mess with pedals. Corey stuff is a lot more straightforward. And while I've added a couple things on this tour, even with that, we had our pre-production rehearsals and we had a day off. I still went into the rehearsal space. I was like, no one's here making noise. I'm going to spend the next hour just figuring it out.
Yeah.
And even down to the mic, I didn't like the mic that they had at one point. And they're like, "Oh, we have a 421." I'm like, "That's it. Let's do that." So,
nice. What is your rig with Corey? Like your amp rig?
I'm using my SVT VR. At one point, we had the 2 cabs on stage, but actually that got shut down on this tour just because of trailer space. And I think for the upcoming tour, I think it's only 1 semi, so I think that there might not still be room with for the 2 cabs. Although I don't run 2 cabs, it's too loud.
Oh yeah, just
it's a little loud.
Yeah.
You running 2 cabs? You were running 2 cabs and 2 heads?
I tried it, and that is insanely loud because we're not playing stadiums or arenas. It's like maybe some of these places overseas will be, I think some of them are like 3-ish and up 1,000 seaters, but even then, you're still going to get the throw of that one cabinet, depending on, and I still like it. I'm one of those people, I like the front of house guy to be able to actually put the cabinet into the front of house before they start telling you, hey, I can't even put that in the front. All I can use your DI. It's like, no, just turn it down.
Yeah.
The SVT only needs to be at about 3.5 for it to sound, great. Or doing that thing where it starts to have a little bit of that warm breakup.
Yeah, and you set your cabs up traditionally straight up. You don't lay them on their side, so you're not getting any coupling or anything.
Yeah, straight up. I still like being able to feel it up there versus, some people really like all those speakers. I guess it's like probably you get more low end that way.
Yeah. If you're on a smaller stage, my rule of thumb has always been if you're on a smaller stage, I usually set it up on its side because it's essentially like putting 2 410 side by side, and you're not taking people's heads off on stage. Whereas
that makes sense. Yeah,
when you're on a bigger stage and you need more throw at you, then you set it, and that's how the cabinet was designed, was to be stood straight up anyway. So
yeah.
So. Okay.
I was gonna say one day with the multi-cabs, I have the dream of having the Cliff Williams thing where it's just like a row of these 810s. I remember seeing AC/DC in must have been like 2000 or something like that, and I feel like there had to be like 4 cabinets up there or something like that.
It's this, and there's, you see on some of the Facebook groups like some of these rigs that these guys are running in less than small rooms, let's say, like
yeah. I mean that's got to be taking people's, there's a certain thing. I love things loud, but the second you start even as just a bass, like you turn up louder, you're gonna have your guitar players turning up louder, and then your tone is, to me, it's gonna suffer because you're gonna keep going louder and louder and louder, and then it's gonna start breaking up, and it's like your brain starts clipping. You don't even know what you're hearing anymore. You're like, well, it's like it doesn't sound like what you think it does.
Yeah,
if you were to mic that up.
Especially, when you get into a situation where you're so loud you can't distinguish the difference in a half step, in a half tone.
Yeah.
And it's like it's so, and I've been in that situation too as well. But so do you use in-ears when you're on stage with Corey, or is it all stage volume and wedges?
So we have wedges because he does not like in-ears because he's old school. Slipknot's the same thing, I guess, where no tracks, no click, nothing like that. Wow. So we do that, but the drummer, and one of the guitar players, most of the time also, we requested to use in-ears because I don't like hanging out right in the front. Another AC/DC thing in my brain. I always thought it was awesome where he would only go up when he kind of had to, and then he would go right back, and it was like, let them do the things up there. But when I'd go back, I couldn't hear anything that was going on the other side of the stage, and some of the songs are being started over there, and I'm like, I think he's starting it. I can't hear the tempo. So I was like, if I get in-ears, I don't have to hang out all the time up front to get that monitor. But it's definitely loud because that monitor is on. So in case he's walking around or anyone's walking around, that monitor is still on, but I have the in-ears as well.
Okay. Yeah.
I much prefer in-ears. Some people don't like them. To me, it sounds like a studio because I have my tube DI and the Ampeg SVT all in there, blended.
Yeah.
To however I like it.
Yeah. No, and that's I hated them at first too, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like it's just you get to a certain point. It's like, oh wow, I can actually hear what's going on the other side of the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think it as long as you have a good monitor person, I think that makes the big difference.
Oh yeah.
I've definitely done some throw and go festivals where they go, do you want it? And the console can't be used or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to use wedges then, because you start the show, you have 15 minutes with all the bands stacked like that. And then you get on stage and the in-ears are on, all you hear is like one random tom really loud.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe like a backup vocal. And you're like, well, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing that happens on like song 5 that you didn't think about is like 20 dB hotter than everything else. And you're like, oh God, and you can't get out of it. That's the scariest thing ever, man. It's like you can't escape it fast enough.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and in some cases you can do more damage to your hearing if you have an errant in-ear mix or I got into the habit of I would literally at one point I downloaded every remote app for like the Midas, the Mackie boards, the QSC boards, like every app I could possibly get on my phone. So when I'd walk in a room, I would just ask the front of house guy, hey, can you give me access to my own monitor channel? And I don't have to bug you for the rest of the night. I can just all mix it right here. They're like, absolutely. Here you go. Leave me alone, kid.
Yeah.
So
but to me, it's like on the, I think me and you were talking just before it's about the SGT. That one to me is one of those ones where it's like that with in-ears is a really magic combo. And I don't do, at least currently, I'm not touring anything where it's an ampless situation, but when I play at churches, it's a lot of times ampless, and that SGT through in-ears sounds fantastic. That cabs him. And I think me and you, Dom, had talked about that the preset 210 that's in the user one. That's the one that I'm like, I just swear by that setting right now.
It's so good. It's just clean. Like it doesn't have the mud of anything else.
No, I'm obsessed with the actual 210 AV also. That's like kind of like my go-to, at least how I preset tones at home, because I can't in this little house, I can't blast an actual SVT without, probably getting the police called.
Yeah.
Man, that's so on your church gig, that is your rig, the SGT DI with your
in-ears. That's it. Yeah, it's like so that one, and it's funny because it's like I see a lot of guys or other people I see they're using the B15 setting. I actually really love that SVT setting too. It's like I thought, when I got it, I thought I was going to be using it for the B15 setting. I'm like, man, the SVT one ended up being the one that I'm currently primarily using on stuff. It's like, granted, I'm not doing anything that's a little bit more mellowed out right now, but yeah, that pedal I'm fully obsessed with. That's the one that I'm like, I'm bringing it everywhere. I'm like, that's the one. Just
awesome.
Pop it right down.
So the you're using the SVT on the SGT circuit, and then the 210 in the user slots.
Yeah, just exactly as it came, though. I didn't change the mic or anything, or didn't go into the SVT suite and change anything. I'm just using it exactly as it is, like maybe change the cab volume. But that's become like, currently that's the one that I'm like obsessed with. I'm like, that just does the thing. It cuts through.
That's cool.
Dino, it's almost like a producer picked those things and the mic and the...
Yeah, exactly. You totally caught me off guard on that, because I was thinking of something completely different. I was like, I'm thinking from the standpoint, it's like, man, we got to start like a users group where people can set in their settings and maybe share IRs.
Yeah,
with one, like, hey man, I got this really cool IR that I shot of a 210 cab, and just sharing like a SGT support group.
Like a little forum within
that
interface.
Yeah. Now, are you using the SGT? We gotta change the name of this thing.
A lot of acronyms. Yeah.
Are you using it live with Corey too, or is you just using it?
No, I'm gonna be using it probably coming up when I do more Dorothy stuff. The Corey stuff, because punk rock and metal guys, at least in my brain, I go, you try and stick a little true, at least in certain realms, to what was done on some of these records. Like while I recorded the new record with Corey, and that one I had 2 Ampeg channels, one being an SVT, and I actually ran that clean, and 60s B15 that they had in the studio. And that one had fuzz hitting at all times, blending those with the DI. But a lot of these other tunes we play, whether it's his other band Stone Sour or Slipknot, I try and use the preamp pedals that those guys were using to try and get close, even though I'm not playing the same bass or amp maybe that they're playing. But that I haven't rocked that boat yet. I was like, I try and stay. There's a little bit of pure to me. I grew up listening to certain metal. I wasn't super into punk growing up, but there's definitely a stay true to the sound and whoever maybe did it within that genre.
Yeah.
To try and honor that.
That's cool.
No, that's why you're working as much as you are, because you know what I mean? You stay true to what you're doing, sort of thing,
I try.
Yeah, no, it's well, and again, that's like, so kind of getting into the, talking a little bit about the secret of your success and the secret of successful bass players, basically guys that are out working, and obviously, you guys are getting called for certain reasons. Sometimes it's, sometimes it's virtuosity, sometimes it's sticking true to the tunes, a lot of times it's feeling. Of course, it's got to be feeling tone. That, in my opinion, comes first and foremost.
Same.
But it's the same thing. Like, I think we had, this is going back a few episodes, we had Andy Sachon on, who's Billy Joel's bass player, and somebody had asked about, do you try and redo or reinvent some of those old Billy Joel bass parts? He was like, why would I do that? Like, that's not doing a service to what was originally, like, how can I improve on perfection, sort of thing. So, kind of like what you were saying, like this, what you're replicating has been put down already. It's already been recorded. There are certain amps that can only get that sound that maybe an Ampeg amp can't get, or a preamp can't get, and you go that far into the material where it's like, oh dude, I'm just exaggerating, but like, yeah, man, he used a Rickenbacker with this preamp and this setting, and and that's the only way I'm going to get that sound, sort of thing.
Yeah, I get real obsessed with like looking at what did somebody do, what were they using. It's like, obviously within the means of what you can do, because we don't obviously all have every single piece of gear that's ever existed. Sure. But trying to actually stay true to it. It's like I'm not going to go playing a Slipknot song and well, here's what I think should have happened. That is, like, it would
Right.
just be. I think
Exactly.
that would upset somebody somewhere, and it would be
Yeah.
like, really disrespectful to what was already laid down. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe even lazy. That's sometimes where it's like, you show up at a gig, somebody, whether it's your drummer or guitar player on a random gig, they didn't do their homework. It's that whole thing where it's like, that's the right thing to do. Do the homework, learn the parts.
Yeah.
And I think most of it, familiarity, even when you're subbing on a gig, that's the other thing. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't want to jump into a gig and kind of rock the boat, and maybe it throws the singer off the guitar player. Maybe they're waiting for that one line. You never know what somebody's fixed on.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. That yeah, again, whoever you were working for or playing for at that particular time, there may be one note in a song that cues where they come in vocal wise or guitar wise or whatever. And you just regard it as like, yeah, it's just one note. I don't need to, and then at rehearsal, like, could you play that one note that you'd never play all the time?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience of where you're playing a show though, and then you go, I'm going to do my thing here. And then you do it, and then the singer just looks back at you. You get that dirty look, like, what were you thinking? You're like, it's like, head down, back to the parts. I won't do that.
I'll tell you a quick funny story. I had just moved back from LA to Boston, and I started playing with a pretty high level wedding band here in Boston. And of course, being in LA for 10 years, and the band leader calls Mustang Sally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We all know Mustang Sally. We've played it a million times. We've fallen asleep half the time. Mustang Sally. Yeah, I got a really cool slap line. And I just basically defecated over the whole tune. Just like, new kid from LA. I'm going to show everybody all my chops. I had my 5-string alembic, and in the middle of the set, we're all in monkey suits in front of bridegroom. As soon as the song is over, he comes walking over to me. I won't swear what he said, but he looks at me, goes, "You ever do that again on a song, I will fire you before the song's even over." He says, "Play the part the way it was written." And from that day, boom, 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 to the point I started playing with this funk guitar player here. And he would always tell people to funk things up, and we'd play Mustang Sally. Like, I'm in the back there going boom, and he's like, "Come on, man, give me some thumb." I was like, nope. But it's the same thing. Yeah, it's like, stay true to the song. Unless somebody wants you to do that, I guess.
I would like to hear the slap version of Mustang Sally.
No. Me too. Now I'm curious.
Never again. Never. But again, it's like. And that's part of being successful at what you do is in some cases as a producer or as a bass player or a sideman, you kind of have to be somewhat of a mind reader too, like what he's telling me or what she's telling me, is that what they really want, or are they implying something else? It's like the Lee Sklar producer switch story.
Right.
Oh yeah. It's great.
So good.
It's not hooked up to anything, but
it's not connected to anything, but you hear that click, know.
So turn the click, change your hand just a little bit, just enough.
Yeah.
Speaking of irony, we have Nicolas Cage on the air here, who has an amazing question. This is an awesome question. If you had a bass it's definitely Nicolas Cage.
It says definitely Nicolas Cage.
If you had a bass that you would call Old Scratchy, which one would it be?
Ooh, I
feel like everyone's got an Old Scratchy. Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's Nicolas Cage.
It's Nicolas Cage. I had a bass. My very first bass was Old Scratchy, but that is during my time at MI. Actually, my car was broken into and was stolen. I was just chatting something about that today. I think actually my reissue P bass is now the Old Scratchy, because that one has been on pretty much every tour I've done in the past 11, 12 years, and it is beat up. People are like, "Oh man, is that a road worn? Is that done?" I was like, "No, when I bought this bass, it was pristine, but it's just, if you wear a bracelet or belts or whatever, it's like it just has just destroyed it." So that's the new Old Scratchy.
The Old Scratchy.
R.I.P. the original bass.
Oh man,
the first bass is long gone.
Oldest Scratchy is somewhere else in a pawn shop somewhere.
That's too funny. I'm just seeing if there were any other comments here. No, I definitely Nicolas Cage. Okay.
we had somebody else who said that somebody named John got their very first SVT CL this week with a Heritage 410 HLF. Congrats.
Awesome. Congrats, John. Good for you, man. That's awesome. Primarily an SVT or B15 player, Eliot.
If I have the choice, it's going to be an SVT, specifically the VR, just because I know where to set. Specifically the mid range. Obviously, the classic, you can get all the same things. And I think, Dino, I think you were the one that had posted a video at some point, probably some years ago, where you talked about you can just crank the master volume and then use the gain as the volume to essentially give it that same point. That's what I'll do that's what I'll do now with the CLs most of the time.
See, Dino, somebody watches your videos.
Yeah,
thank you. Other than my kids.
I definitely watch them. Specifically on how to remove a grill from an SVT.
I watched that as well. I couldn't figure it out.
It's a very useful video.
I couldn't get it off one time. Yeah.
Wow.
See?
I've seen about how to get an 810 into your car. I've seen that video. It's all very useful.
I'm getting choked up here. I'm flattered that you guys are actually watching these videos. It's been a while since I've done any kind of instructional video, so I guess I got to get back at it. But there are a lot of fun
series,
that's part of my assignment here. Is I got to start doing put some venture material out there. So, just how-tos and quick things like that. But that's the thing and anybody that's watching that's familiar with Ampeg too. It's kind of like most of this stuff is pretty much plug and play. Like, for the most part, you could take any amp from Venture to SVT to a B15, set everything flat, adjust your volume, and with a good bass, you're gonna get a good tone. There's just
the 3 Pro. I think maybe I had to look that up. I remember when I got my 3 Pro originally, I didn't fully understand that tube gain one. That was when I was like, I have to figure out how to use this. I don't understand it. Like, it's the opposite of what you think it's going to do. Yeah.
You know what I learned that yesterday? You know who told me? Dino.
No way.
We literally were talking about yesterday because we were talking about the revered 3 Pro. That was my first Ampeg standalone head. And I was like, yeah, man, I always had the tube gain all the way up. I couldn't really figure out what the heck that thing did. It seemed like it was okay. And there was like a delay on like, if you turned it quick enough, you'd hear like some kind of sagging or something going on. Yeah.
You're like, oh, did I break it? But then it tells you there's the sticker as long as you have it on there. It's like a warning about it, I think.
It's basically what's happening is when you go counterclockwise from full up to full off, you're dropping the plate voltage on those tubes from 450 down to 100. So it takes a split second for the tubes to recalibrate down to 100 volts. If you go the opposite, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, literally, Dom and I were just talking because can I give this away a little bit, Dom? So next year is actually the 30th anniversary of the SVT 3 Pro. So that's why we were talking about. Can you believe this amp? I mean, other than the SVT, and if anybody watching can think of anything else, please comment here. But other than the SVT, the 3 Pro is probably the longest standing design amp. I don't know how to say this, but for 30 years, we've been building that same amplifier. And other than the SVT, there's no other amp that I don't think any other bass company can say they've been building for 30 years.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I could be wrong on that, unless it's like a PV or...
How old's the GK had the 800 RB or whatever?
They stopped making it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, GK.
So that's probably like 20 some years or something. But
yeah, I want to say they built that amp for a good 20 some odd years as well. It was a great amplifier, but it got cost prohibitive to build. But yeah, I started thinking about that. I was like, wait a second, we've been building that amp for 30 years consecutively. Like we didn't stop and reissue it, or
Yeah,
that has been the
nothing
longest.
changed in the design. It's crazy.
No,
I mean, nothing. Nothing needs a change.
Yeah.
I use that's kind of like when if it's a in town show, that's usually the 3 pros that I'm
Yeah.
bringing out. I have the
the
50T?
PF.
that
Yeah.
one I'm using a lot here because I like that transformer out as a
Yep.
DI.
Yeah.
Is a
Yeah.
big thing with that. But the 3 is kind of the tried and true. My question is, well, I know that you can get it on, I think, Plugin Alliance and UA, the 3 Pro plugin, but will that ever end up on maybe the SVT suite?
Possibly. That's all I can say.
Come on.
I've been trying to grow SVT Suite since the beginning of SVT Suite.
Yeah.
We're trying to throw as much as we can in there, but we'll see. It's
yeah, that's I have
Yeah.
the V4B plugin from
Mhm.
Plugin Alliance, I
Yep.
think is where it's from. But that's the other one I keep wanting to see. That's just the amp in general. That I'm like, keep waiting. They they're out of stock and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I'm like, that's
And-
probably the next in line.
The Plugin Alliance, they do amps that we don't do in SVT Suite and vice versa, and that kind of creates the harmony between
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
sort of thing too, But I've recorded with the Plugin Alliance 3 Pro. The buddy of mine here has a
Same,
studio and he swears by the 3 Pro. Like anytime I go on a track with him or whatever, he's like, dude,
Cool.
But yeah, it's that's an interesting thought that has been the longest standing other than and actually, I mean, we stopped making the SVT in 85, 86, and it went to the SVT2.
Mhm.
So as we know, it's like a standalone head SVT in a wooden case. We
Yeah.
stopped building those in 86, and then they reemerged again in mid 90s as the SVT CL.
Got it.
And then the VR came.
How in the world did they get away with that for 4 or 5 years? Not having.
Well, again, you got I remember, back in. I'm going to sound like the old man here, but back in those days, I mean, people were giving SVTs away. Nobody wanted an SVT because SWR was coming out with the SM400. GK had the GK in it. Like nobody ever thought they were even Ampeg. We thought we're never going to build a tube amp again. We're never going to have to because everybody wants these 19-inch rack mount hybrid things,
Yeah.
But then, obviously they came back into popularity, and the SVT's never been more popular now than So
speaking of smaller and lighter, sorry, good.
I was gonna say, wasn't in the late 80s or somewhere around there? Wasn't that when those the skunk work?
Yeah,
that was
SVTs came out. There was like the limited run of those. I've seen a couple of those in the wild.
Yeah.
They are like supposed to be like the most spot on kind of reissues, more or less.
So what happened was when SLM, St. Louis Music, purchased what was left of Ampeg, it was basically the name and a bunch of parts that came over from MTI, and they had enough parts left to build, I want to say it was 300 of those original Skunk Works. And those are the designs with the DW7 tubes, and it was like the closest thing to it was an actual SVT from the 70s.
Yeah.
But they only had enough parts to build so many of them, and then and they're all numbered 1 through 300, and that's the original Skunk Works stuff.
I'll see them occasionally around. I'm like, it's like seeing it's like any vintage amp. It's like, whoa, one of those. They have that little plate on the back.
Yep. It's a little bit of a historical piece, but I mean, it's an SVT. It's tubes and circuitry, and it goes boom, boom, boom. So no, I mean, like, I see guys that are like, oh, I've got number 10 of 300 and I want $10,000 for it, sort of thing. It's like, it's an amp.
Yeah.
It's anyways.
I'm gonna be that guy one day. I have 2 questions, and then we actually have another cool online question. First one is, with your VR, at least for the Corey Tour, are you using both channels? Do you strategically use those?
I've just been still using one normal. I wanted too. I remember halfway through the tour, I was like, I think this would be cool to add more EQ into it, was kind of the idea. But once the whole machine got rolling, it gets really hard to make noise when you have these opening bands. You don't want to be rude and take their time. And he has to do we do these meet and greet sound checks and stuff like that. So the time starts getting limited between, he doesn't, these aren't massive shows like maybe 2000 years and stuff like that, but the production is there. So there's a lot of staying out of everyone's way. I don't want to be that guy, even if we're the band or whatever, where it's just ruining the sound guy's ability to do it. So I haven't gotten to mess with the 2 channels. I really want to.
Yeah.
I tried it at one point with Dorothy, and it was unnecessary in that situation. I think with Corey, it would benefit more because there's 2 to 3 loud guitars at all times.
Yeah.
I think having a little more EQ points would be kind of nice.
Cool. Yeah, I was just curious about that. And then, we were talking about smaller, lighter, rack mount heads, things like that. And I really want to get your take, since you're such an avid SVT player, on like a V12 for Venture, just to see.
Oh yeah, I'm dying. It's funny because I was looking at those recently. I'm like, because I haven't gotten to try one yet. I haven't seen them. I haven't seen any. I've only been in town back for less than a month. But I keep saying the V7, the V12. I'm like, which one I want, or the V3 because it's so tiny too. And I'm like, I like that the 7 and the 12 have that compression on it. And I really like that compression on the SGT. It's funny because I don't really use compressor pedals live, other than sometimes if it's like a really straightforward like pop country kind of thing, or if you're playing at church, a compressor is very handy. But I really like that compressor, especially when you have the grit on the SGT side. It really does this, like, very much starts to sound like an amp. It's very natural sounding, doesn't sound like somebody's holding me back.
So
I see. Is the compressor on the V3 as well, or is it just on the 7 and 12?
Just on 7 and 12,
Yeah.
And we'll have to set up a time. You can come into the headquarters. We'll set up a bunch of cabs.
Would love to.
Up.
But I will say though, Ellie, you're one of the few people that, and I want more people to experiment with this, because the circuitry between the compressor and the SGT circuit work. Like, some guys are like, I didn't find the compressor very useful. Well, they work hand in hand with one another. And you're obviously you're seeing that. So
it's that grit side where if somebody's not sure, if anyone's watching and is curious, it's specifically to me where that compressor really starts to do this very real sounding thing, where it really starts to feel like an amp, is depending on like what you're doing with the grit side of it. Those two things really react, I think, to each other very well. And in a not like hindering sort of way. It's like, I think some people also just expect when they turn the grid on that they're going to have like some sort of metal distortion or something like that. I'm like, that's not, at least as far as I see it, I don't think that's the point of the grid side.
Correct.
You could make it do that, but if you're trying to get like a B15 breaking up kind of thing, or if you're maxing out an SVT, that's how I see that grid. It's like, you can go overboard really fast and find out you can turn a B15 up also really, loud. See what that sounds like. It might not be what you think it's going to be like.
Right.
Yeah. No, and that's very true. It's not a distortion circuit. It's more of like,
it's more like an amp emulator, but I hate using the word emulator because a lot of people equate that to digital and it's all analog. But it's almost like you're emulating the tube pre's of either of those amps.
And I think it does it. It's, to me, of the preamp pedals that I've played at this point, it's the most natural sounding. So congrats to you guys on that. I'm obsessed with that pedal.
Thank you.
It's good to hear that, man. Sorry, good.
No, what were you going to say, Dom?
I was going to bring up Artemis's question about, where was it?
What's your favorite moment on Corey?
I mean, it's funny because we do a lot of goofing off on stage.
Come on.
It is. We obviously take the song seriously, but I had started this trend. It was, I wasn't trying to be funny. Apparently, it was. We're at rehearsals, and he's playing a song called "Through Glass," which is a very big Stone Sour song. It is, and there's about 2.5 minutes before I start playing. Well, I had started eating a donut before we started rehearsing. I had set it on my backup amp behind my amp. So I was like, oh, I have a chance to finish this donut. I start eating it. Everyone's laughing at me. He doesn't know. And then he's like, why is everyone laughing? He sees me eating this donut. Someone gets a picture of it. And he's like, you know what you get for that? Every show is going to end with a picture of you with that donut on all 4 LED screens. And that's how the show was ending every night on tour.
That's good.
My favorite. It's really just like the childish moments, to the point where we had somebody, then I had the tech, I was like, can we, they had me give donuts out after, as everyone's giving out picks and set lists and stuff.
Yeah.
I had these Krispy Kreme donuts outside, handing them out, not thinking about that they now were melting during the show. So I'm handing these people these glazed donuts that are just like a liquefied donut, and they don't look very happy about it.
I thought you were gonna bring up the trumpet episode. If
no, that if anyone's curious, there's I played some natural trumpet on Corey's record. We spent a lot of time in the studio, 6 weeks.
Well, it was funny. Like I was trying to get some background on you, actually. You know what I mean? Like, just kind of just building my profile of any artist that comes on, and I see Eliot Lorango plays trumpet. I was like, oh, I didn't know he was a brass player.
Oh no!
And it's the first video. It's the first link that comes up in your search.
It's great because he has a lot of fans, so they get to see that of his bass player.
Yep,
that's amazing.
So actually, Mark Damon is asking likes, dislikes between amp and ampless setups. Preference for all of you guys. I
all day long. I want an amp all day long. Yeah,
me too.
I'm with Eliot, where it's like if I can have in-ears and a wedge going and my amp going, obviously that's the best case. And it's so annoying for other people to set up, apparently, but I love it. It's the best of all worlds.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Eliot?
I've only done one full tour that was ampless, and while I loved the tour, I never was happy with the way it felt or sounded.
The way it felt.
Yeah, that was the big thing, and it never felt very real as far as the way I'm used to it, I should say. And I think I think that there's the one I was using, the digital rig I was using, I didn't like. I think that the Helix, actually, I think that one sounds fairly natural. And now with the SGT, but I really like the way when you hit a note, what it feels like coming off of those actual speakers with the wood. And, some people go like, well, it's only a digital thing captures what it would sound like mic'd. I'm like, well, but it's also not capturing what that sounds like throwing at you.
Yes.
Because the mic is getting the speaker, but it's not getting the wood and all the things resonating in the room and all that stuff. And it's like, you can, and I think a lot of it's fairly close, but it's just not as fun.
Yeah.
To be real. It's just more fun.
Well, you just nailed it right on. It's not as fun.
Yeah.
It's not like half the gigs we do, you know what I mean? I mean, a lot of the gigs we do is we want to bring stuff out and play with it. We want to play with our toys.
It's rock and roll.
Yeah.
It's also like there is, if the front of house has if there's any detriment there, if there's anything that is like just not hitting 10 out of 10, there's no stage volume to come through and kind of save that a little bit. And I just saw one of my favorite bands ever, and I won't say who it was because it was one of the worst shows I've ever seen. It had nothing to do with them. It was just the whole band was on ampless setups.
Yep.
And they're like big rock band. And the front of house was so quiet because that Greek theater, and it was just like some kind of curfew neighborhood kind of thing where they just weren't able to go over a certain dB level. And there was just nothing coming from the stage, but just the drums. But it sounded like the drums were anemic because they're just the only thing kind of going on. And there's no like on stage, there's no like side fills or anything going. It was just, felt really untrue to the sound.
I find something really kind of hard to watch in small venues specifically is where it starts to get a little weird to me, where if something's totally amplified but they have a drummer, I feel like there's a large part of the audience that's in the front there
Yep.
that it's a very weird experience. Now, yeah, sometimes you're not going to get the vocals and you're there, but you're so used to just hearing like kind of guitars and bass hitting you in the face. But when it's amplitude in, let's say, a 500 cap room or something like that, or maybe even 1,000, it starts to get a little weird. Now, at the stadium level, I think people probably aren't hearing your amps really at all at that point in the arena.
Right.
In those small venues, it's like at least having the digital thing run through maybe at least a small cabinet or something like that.
Yeah.
Just have something throwing into the air.
There's a certain energy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, let's face it. Sound waves create energy. Energy gets absorbed by people. Not to get too weird about it, but there's a certain energy that's just not there on stage because you don't have all that air moving, basically, all that energy being transferred, so it's all that energy is up in here, and as useful as this is for being able to hear guys across the stage and getting a good balance, I still think it's important to have an amp on stage, or some sort of energy source on stage that's gonna do that for you,
Totally.
Yeah. Hey, we're getting, in fact, we went over about 11 minutes, so I apologize for the overtime here. But before we go, Dom, you're going to laugh.
Let's do it.
Because we haven't done this in a while. And
I know.
I'm totally going to blindside you on this, but we have we have 10 questions that I usually ask. They're very simple questions. We call it Dino's 10 rapid fire. So it's basically 10 quick questions. You can't really think about them that much. You just got to kind of blurt out the answer. There's nothing weird about it. It's all base related. So
they're simple questions, but they're not easy questions.
Yeah. They're simple, but they're not easy. So, okay. Number 1, P bass or jazz bass?
P bass.
Okay. Number 2, passive or active?
Passive.
Okay. Number 3, B15, SVT, or Pro Series?
SVT.
Okay. Cable or wireless?
Cable.
Okay. Pick or fingers?
Fingers.
Okay. We just talk about this. IEMs or floor wedges?
IEMs.
Okay.
I think this one, yeah.
Yep. Pedals or no pedals?
Pedals.
Okay. Window or aisle?
Aisle.
Okay. High bunk or low bunk?
Low.
Okay. And then black with white piping or silver and blue? Talking cosmetics, obviously.
Is this for like the SVT? Because I like the silver. The silver.
Yep. Okay.
I love the old aesthetic.
All right, cool. That was easy. See,
that was the most. He was the most definitive answer that we've had.
I was waiting to hear both on IEMs and wedges. Like, can I get both?
I'm so hardcore about the IEMs. As long as you have good in-ears. Some of the generics are the ones where it can sound a little bit like a trash can in your head.
Yeah.
But if you have some better ones, it's pleasant.
Yes. Some people, they kind of stumble on the picks or fingers. Question. It's like, it all depends on the song. It's like, no, you gotta.
It's also funny, because it's like, as a bassist, so many of those things is like your identity as a bassist. You're like, I don't want people to think I'm this player,
Yeah, I mean, I have to play with the pick. I feel like 50% of the time. I didn't learn how to play with the pick till later in life. It was all, what is Steve Harris and Geezer Butler and Jocko? It was all fingers. So that's how I learned. It's like,
yep. Man,
the pick the pick is still a challenge to me.
It's a challenge to me too. And Dom, I know you play really well with the pick.
Thank you. I didn't learn until later either. Actually, I was like so anti-pick growing up because it was like it was like, no, you got to be soulful,
Yeah.
Little did I knew nothing at the time, but
same.
I don't know. I say this all the time. Some of the best bass lines were written on a cheap Hofner with a pick. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anyways, the absolute best.
Yep. Well, man, I don't want to keep you too much longer. There's one question I got to add on this. Round wound or flats?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Round.
That's a good. Yeah. Okay.
I'd say round. I love both, but round. You can get rounds that sound like flats if you just let them die too.
That's true. I'm putting it in there right now.
It depends on what you're playing. You know, I think that's the other thing. It's like, I think half my bases have flats, half round.
There you go. Yeah, it all depends on what you're playing. So
yeah.
I'm going to post this up here real quick. Thank you, Haji, for putting this up here. This is your website for anybody that wants to look you up and follow you. And this is your Instagram. And again, anybody wants to follow Eliot, this is his Instagram. And I don't know if he put your he might be feverishly working on your Facebook page, but yeah, anybody wants to follow Eliot, please join him here. And Eliot, what can I say, man? Thank you so much for your time. This is
thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor. You know, I'm obsessed with all things Ampeg.
The honor is
all of your videos.
The honor is all ours, man. Absolutely. And again, I love this forum because it allows us to like finally sit down and just have a conversation and talk about stuff. And, you know, it's not the trade show craziness or the business craziness. It's just an open forum for us to talk base. So, and
congrats on these new releases,
Thank
the
you.
SVT and the Venture. They're, I think they're a huge step into the modern, and I think it's very accessible for new and old style players.
Thank you. And definitely hit Dom up when you have time.
Yeah,
come on
I want to try those new Ventures.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. And everybody, as always, thank you so much for watching. Next SVT time is in 2 weeks. We don't have any artists scheduled, but we do have artists for the month of November into December, which I'll mention that coming up here, and just look for advertisements. But I think in 2 weeks it might be Dom and I talking more about venture and gear and stuff like that. But I want to thank Aaron, who puts this all together for us, and of course Haji in the background that's posting the links and everything. What can I say? We'll keep doing this until they tell us to stop doing it. So hopefully not anytime soon. And again, Eliot, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you guys.
Dino, thank you guys.
We'll see you all in 2 weeks. All right, guys.
Thank you.
See you soon.